I went out to Vegas last week to shoot the Consumer Electronics Show, CES 2023. If you don't know what that is, it's where all the big tech companies go to show off their new future technology. There were robot artists, autonomous electric cars, a robot dentist, AR goggles that almost look like regular glasses, a whole mess of companies showing off commuter vehicles that look like the ones from Westworld Season 4, cool little delivery robots, an EV Volkswagen bus, this car with light-up paint, these old dudes playing pinball. And did you know the DeLorean's coming back? It's like a Cybertruck and the new Batman car got mixed in an AI. In this video, I'm going to talk about all the equipment I used and had to carry around with me for 10 hours each day to pull off all the B-roll you're going to see here. In order to get smooth shots with a lot of movement, but often in low light, or in some cases in super low light, but surrounded by extremely bright lights, you can really only pull off some of these shots with a fairly modern camera with a really big sensor. I shot most of this footage with the Sony a7S III. And even then, you really can't hold a camera still enough with your hands and get this much motion while walking unless you've got it attached to the top of a gimbal. So my a7S III was mounted to the top of a Ronin SC2 most of the time I was there. I knew I was going to want some really close-up shots of things and some really smooth wide shots of things on a gimbal, so I also packed a giant man purse for day one. For close-up shots, I went with this big 70 to 200 millimeter 2.8 G Master. It's a simple reality that big crowds look cooler through a long lens. Something about the perceived background compression makes everyone look all packed in even more than they really are. That, and there was just bound to be some things I wanted a really close look at that would be out of reach, like this LiDAR sensor mounted on top of this giant LED screen. It's like 20 or 30 feet tall. And then for the wide shots and for circling around some of these big displays just to show the massive scale of some of these exhibits, I also packed a Sigma 24 to 70 2.8. This lens is pretty heavy, but if when you're balancing the gimbal you set it first to about 45 or 50 millimeters and then get the balance there, then the motors on the RSC2 are still strong enough that no matter where you are in the focal range, you can go all the way to 70, all the way back to 24. It can handle the entire zoom range of this lens without having to rebalance the gimbal. It's actually really handy. When you rack a lens from wide to telephoto, the glass inside has to physically move forward, which moves the center of balance of the whole camera forward. Earlier gimbals' motors were too weak to compensate for this sort of thing, and they would really start to shake or rattle. But I think from the RSC2 and forward, that's no longer going to be a problem. So that allowed for a wide range of stabilized shots throughout the show without having to take time to rebalance the gimbal. 24 millimeters on a full frame camera is pretty good and wide, and 70 millimeters is nice and tight for most situations. While I was there, I did several different interviews with some of the exhibitors I wanted to make little stories about. And so I also brought these little Rode Wireless 2 Go mics with me. The receiver for these little guys just hangs out on top of the camera, and there are two mics that both sync to one receiver. So the way I worked it, I was just wearing this messenger bag the whole time I was there, and I had two of these clipped to my bag ready to go, and anytime I wanted to ask somebody some questions, I would just grab one of these and clip it to their lanyard. That way, I was still wearing one, and they were wearing one, and we were both mic'd up, and the whole setup for an interview process was like 6 seconds. The batteries on these things last for like 8 hours, so you can just leave them on the whole day, ready to go at any time. The mics talk to the receiver, and the receiver just pumps the feed straight into the camera. I make regular posts to a Reddit group about a LiDAR company called Microvision. And while I was in their booth talking to their media person, they asked if I'd come back the next day and shoot one of their live presentations at the booth. As an investor and someone who follows their company really closely, what an honor. But that, of course, meant that on day 2, I had to add a second camera and a tripod to my already heavy load. Here's me trucking through CES on day 2, over encumbered. I shot their presenter from a tripod from my a7 IV at 50 millimeters, getting their whole stage in frame. Then I just walked around with the gimbal to get a second angle of him, which is really helpful for editing when someone makes a mistake and you want to cut it out without it being obvious that you cut it out. So this is the full kit I had on my person at CES 2023. a7S III for video, primarily with the 24 to 70 Sigma 2.8 as the main run and gun, a7 IV for the few stills I took and as the second camera for the presentation that I filmed, the 70 to 200 G Master from Sony for those hard to reach shots, and a nifty 50 as a backup. These are super cheap and basically weightless, so it's never a real burden to keep one in your bag. The DJI Ronin RSC2 gimbal, a little joystick broke on this thing, so it might be time to upgrade to the current model. This is so far my favorite little tripod for traveling. It collapses down really small, it's super duper light, made from Small Rig. I'll put links to all this stuff down in the description. I actually had 2 sets of these Wireless Go Rode mics to prepare for dead batteries. Never needed the second one though. And then speaking of batteries for cameras, I just use a backup battery with a cord coming out of my bag bag rather than spare camera batteries. All these new Sony cameras let you charge while they're running, so I just find it way easier to just never take the batteries out of them. Just plug one of these things in and fish a cord to it if it ever starts getting low. These batteries last a pretty long time though. I had this little baby boom mic with me, but I never ended up using it for anything. That's the kit. Well, plus this camera bag and this messenger bag. With this group of items, you can basically make a Netflix documentary quality video about pretty much any event. I'm sure a lot of you know carrying multiple lenses, a couple of cameras, a tripod, some backup batteries, and a gimbal for a whole day is pretty awful. I mean, even just this one camera with a big lens on it gets pretty heavy after a few hours of walking around. And this show had more than 1.8 million square feet of exhibitor space, not to mention getting there from my hotel in the first place. I was staying at Circus right across the street, but everything is so giant in Vegas that just getting from my room down to the hotel lobby was like a 10-minute walk. And then from one end of the convention center to the other was basically a whole day if you went down every one of the aisles. That show is massive. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is if you want to make a life out of covering events and expos, it might be a good idea to hit the gym and beef up those arms a little bit and get your shoulders used to carrying heavy bags for a bunch of hours at a time. It's harder than you might think before you do it. It's one thing to bring a whole bunch of equipment to an interview or like a music video shoot or something, but there's usually somewhere to set stuff down once you get there. At these big shows, you're carrying all of whatever you might want to use for the entire thing. Or get an assistant, I guess. Man, I would love an assistant. Or a partner. If you and someone else work together and you both shoot with Sony, you can share lenses, carry less weight. So pretty much what I'm saying, Andy, you're coming with me next year. That's CES.